Hey guys, welcome to History Gaming Verified. Sorry for the long delay since the last video. Windows Update decided to entirely wreck my PC, but despite all obstacles, here we are with a new episode, and today we are taking a look at Hearts of Iron 4. Let's start with an important part of the Second World War. Some very realistic games were actually made about submarines. And in Hearts of Iron 4, they are virtually useless. They get sunk extremely fast because destroyers hit them far better than subs could fire back. The weapon range of destroyers is twice as high, and if a DD actually gets hit by a submarine, it has a higher probability to survive the hit. This is for early war though, and gets worse for the subs later on. In reality, submarines were able to deal crippling damage with a single torpedo hit, especially against such a small target as a destroyer. On the other hand, these needed around 100 depth charges to damage or destroy a submarine, and the destroyer had to drop these directly on top of the enemy boat. This is absolutely not realistic, and the game seriously needs a distinction between submerged and surface submarines, and probably also one between regular naval battles and anti-submarine operations. Now for something that is depicted quite correctly in my opinion. Air power. If two sides are evenly matched, air power is the key to victory. While air superiority influencing ground battles might seem strange at first glance, you just have to remember how hard the Allied command of the air hit German ground operations in Normandy and later on during the Ardennes offensive. Not only because of enemy airstrikes, but also because of the simple possibility of them. Marching columns could only move at night, and the Ardennes offensive was specifically planned to begin during a period of poor weather to disrupt Allied bombing attempts. If your bombers are conducting ground strike missions, this hits the enemy's organization and increases their attrition. Of course, these effects are more severe if you hold air supremacy. There are 2 or 3 small dirty marks though, reducing the historical validity to a point. Planes effectively beam to their targets without moving through the airspace between their target and the airfield. This is still kinda realistic as bombers and the fighters escorting them usually flew at a very high altitude, and it took the enemy some time to reach this height. High altitude patrols though were not unknown, especially for night fighters over Germany, and it was typical for the German Luftwaffe to, nibble at the bomber formations attacking German cities quite some time before they reached their targets. A service ceiling modifier for some missions could be a workaround here, or additional attrition for crossing enemy-controlled airspace. Another of these stains is the absence of close air support on dedicated targets. As Hearts of Iron 4 uses an air region system in which the area units operate, you can't order concentrated attacks by CAS units like Stukas on specific targets on the front line. Instead, all ground battles covered by an air region are supported by CAS attacks if such planes are active there. Tactical and strategical bombing is affected to a degree by this too. Last but not least, transport planes are not able to deliver supply, but just a few Ju-52 are capable of dropping a whole German Fallschirmjäger division. At least, the last 2 points are planned to be fixed in the next DLC though. Time for something very important. Research! Or, in other words, it should be very important, because at the moment, effectively all research put into better weapons, tanks, planes and ships is irrelevant. Newer tanks, artillery and so on cost more resources to produce, and this is fine. But the costs outweigh the effectiveness by far. For example, you are able to produce almost double the number of Schleswig-Holstein class battleships than you are able to build Bismarck class BBs. And these battleships that are actually pre-Dreadnought era ships are absolutely capable of destroying Bismarcks in a 1 versus 1 fight if they got enough experience beforehand. In reality, they could not even make a dent in the funnel. This makes it possible to beat the Imperial Japanese Navy with one of the Chinese minor factions, and translates directly into tanks, guns, AT guns, artillery and planes. All you need is the right doctrine. Then your production and superior numbers will outweigh any technological advantage your enemy has. For a more graphic example, in Hearts of Iron 4, 20 Panzer I kill a Tiger. Yay! In reality, research and development was extremely important, and technology made a huge leap forward during the war. So the inferiority of dated equipment should have far worse consequences in battle. Next up, we have the quite realistic display of the importance of resources. While the resource and trade system as a whole might seem a bit wacky, the repercussions of missing materials are not. It hampers production of war materials to sometimes extreme levels, and acquiring enough oil, rubber, tungsten, chrome and aluminum can be the reason for the next offensive or invasion, pretty much as in reality. At the same time, hampering the enemy's resource supply can have a devastating chain effect for production and to some degree for the units in the field and in training. This leads us directly to the next negative point on my list: fuel, or more precisely, the non-existence of it. The developers decided to leave direct fuel consumption and supply out of the game and used a more abstract approach. Production of tanks, for example, consumes oil, and quite a lot of it. The tanks are pretty much built with their fuel, and such the reinforcements you have to build for lost tanks and that reach the tank divisions are more or less their fuel supply. This is a very abstract concept, and I don't approve of it, but this is not the point. The problem now is, if you lose your oil supply, only the production of new tanks is hampered, not the effectiveness of tanks or planes, ships or even motorized infantry already in the field. These units still move and fight as if they had fuel to power their engines. Now, let's take a look at the historical facts. The Italian Navy was more or less impotent halfway through the war because of fuel shortages. The destruction of the German coal liquefaction facilities by the 8th US Air Force left the Luftwaffe without 92% of their fuel supply and the rest of the Wehrmacht with a 50% reduction. This was one of the heaviest blows for Germany's war effort during the entire war. In Hearts of Iron 4, your troops may start to suffer after a time, mainly because you might not be able to keep them up to full strength and replace equipment losses, but otherwise there are no effects at all. On top of that, in-game oil is a pretty easy to acquire resource for the German Reich and Italy by building such coal liquefaction facilities. In my eyes, this is an easy to fix issue, simply by adding fuel to the supply chain as a modifier linked directly to the oil resources available, also linked with the effective mission range of aircrafts. Alright, now something for people who like it dirty. Terrain. Terrain has always played a major role in every war in human history, and so it does in Hearts of Iron 4. Charging a dug-in enemy in a mountainous region will see your troops bleed heavily, and believe me, don't try this with tanks. Urban areas, hills, forests, swamps, jungle and mountains are the territory of your infantry, and its specialized cousins from the mountaineer and paratrooper branches of service. At the same time, tanks excel in open terrain and desert, and if you want to invade Overlord style against some real defenses, you should use Marines, really. There's a small problem though. Rivers pose a serious obstacle for any attack, and in my opinion a far too big one. Despite this minor drawback, I think the influence of terrain on World War II warfare is depicted quite nicely, including cover from air attacks. And now I'll be talking about something that a lot of the fans of Hearts of Iron 4 will consider to be a minor issue, if at all. The game is obviously planned to play out ahistorical, at least in the long run. And this is absolutely fine. I think I am one of the very few players who would actually enjoy playing the Reich and fight a losing war against the Allies and the Soviet Union until Berlin falls. At some point you want to reverse history. Alright, not really, because I'm pretty sure a Nazi-dominated world would have been a horrific place to live in. But you want to win the war, no matter which side you play. I am fine with that. The problem is, the game does not allow you a historical play until Barbarossa. Not even if you ticked off the option historical. Even then the AI may choose to declare war on Germany if it tries to annex parts of Czechoslovakia, and AI Romania may join the Allies to stop the Soviet Union from annexing Bessarabia. Even minor events still have a small probability to play out ahistorical, like the airship Hindenburg not exploding in Lakehurst but instead being used by Rudolf Hess for a strange mission to Great Britain, or Amelia Earhart completing her circumnavigation of the world, which actually grants the USA a free ace in case of war, as Earhart may join the Army Air Force and can be killed during an air battle. And last but not least, the nuclear bomb. It has next to no effect, especially on troops. While the enemy will suffer a reduction of its national unity if you drop it on a victory point, and therefore will be more susceptible to capitulate, Troops on the ground only lose organization and are ready to fight again within a few days. I never noticed any direct effects of lost men or equipment, while infrastructure, factories and such will be damaged, but easily repaired within a few months. Because of the radiation and extensive destruction, it should take years for these repairs, and to be honest, at least a part of the factories located in a nuked province should be destroyed completely. It took Japan several years from 1949 on to rebuild Hiroshima and the part of Nagasaki that was hit. This was during peacetime though, so how long it would have taken during a still raging war and with resources most likely rather used for the war effort than rebuilding a city is not really accessible. But it is pretty obvious it would take very, very long. Of course, depicting the massive devastation and loss of life caused by a nuke in a game is not easy, but the effect it has in Hearts of Iron 4 is just not enough. Alright, let's summarize. At least two of the major deciding factors of the Second World War, air power and resources, play a very important role in game. The significance of terrain for battles is displayed nicely. But there are also major deciding factors that were completely missed, for example fuel supply and production. A load of technical errors or bad design decisions that lead to important factors not working as they did in history, like research, submarines and nukes, and extreme timeline breaks like Romania joining the Allies. This leads to a simple conclusion. Hearts of Iron 4 does not really depict the Second World War. It tries to do this and is even partially successful at it, but bad design decisions leave us with a product that is more a sandbox grand strategy game with 1936 borders and nations. You have to work to get an even close to reality World War II experience, and while it is sometimes possible to get there, some factors are simply not in your hands. There is a chance the game might come closer to what I hope is the developer's goal, namely becoming a valid Second World War grand strategy game, not a pure sandbox. As Crusader Kings 2 and Europa Universalis 4 are still receiving DLCs and updates, I hope Paradox Interactive tries to perfect Hearts of Iron 4 in the same way. Sadly, this changes do nothing about my assessment. For now. Not improved. Now, if you want to vote for the next game or DLC I should take a look at, simply click the small info button in the upper right corner. If you like what I do, you might also enjoy the last video about Call of Duty World War II, and if you are playing Hearts of Iron 4 right now, Military History Visualized actually has some ideas about historical division compositions for you. All the best, and see you on the next video.